You are watching a program by Organization for Women's Liberation. In today's program, we have an interview with Azar Mojidi, the chairperson of Organization for Women's Liberation. Thanks, Azar, for accepting this invitation.
Thanks so much for giving me this opportunity.
This interview today is about the recent events and the political events and to some extent humanitarian tragedies that are happening in Iraq. Could you, Azar, please just give us an overview of the last 2 weeks' events in Iraq regarding the attacks by the so-called ISIS, the Sunni militia group, who are attacking most and actually capturing most of the cities in Iraq?
What's happening is really, really awful. It's horrid. It's devastating to see. After all what has happened to Iraq in the past 11 years after the attack of United States, Britain and their allies, now this attack is tearing the country apart even more. What it is this ISIS was, it's sort of trying, they say, let's say, that they want an Islamic State in both Iraq and Syria. So they had started in Syria, they were Al-Qaeda, and now they sort of, they have split from them and they're acting so-called on their own. What we have to remember is these Islamic terrorist groups are being supported by some main sort of regional powers or international powers. They're not on their own, so-called. And Saudi Arabia is backing ISIS, and Qatar is also one of those countries that's supporting it and was training them in Qatar. What has happened is since the uprising of people in Syria, then the brutal suppression of Syrian state, then we had these Islamic groups forming. There are secular groups as well, but all this formation of an opposition, armed opposition, that Islamist groups have a very high position, and they are supported by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey. They were not this group particularly, but this opposition, armed opposition, was supported by Turkey as well. And now this has come to Iraq. It happened very suddenly. No one was expecting it. One day we woke up and we heard that ISIS has come to Mosul, very close, and has killed many people and is going to get Basra and is getting close to Baghdad. They just because the Iraqi army did not resist. There are a lot of sort of factors here. We could in our continuing our discussion, we could get to that. But what has happened now is they are claiming that they are fighting for Sunnis, and Iraqi government is to Shia, and the Kurdish sort of autonomous region has also is getting ready to, if necessary, to fight against them. Iran has sent its Pastarans, its militia there. So all these fights are going on, and US and Britain are saying they're not going to send any arms or military, but they're sending help, or they're helping. And it's so when you look at it just outside, it looks so confusing that to find out who's who and what is what, it becomes very, very difficult. But I think once we start to get into it, delve into it, we would find out how all these international forces are behind these tragic events in Iraq. They've killed many people, and they have tried to even deepen even more the sectarianism that started so terribly after the attack of US and Britain in Iraq.
I would like to ask you a question, but I think I'll leave it for later, about the big picture, because as you said, there is a confusion as to what is exactly going on, and I think it would help if one gives a bigger picture of what is going on in the Middle East in general and in Iraq in particular. But we'll come back to that. Some say that, or US claims that the turmoil that is happening, it actually reflects the Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki's failure to draw Sunnis into the political force and the political process that is going on in the country. What do you say about that? Do you think that's just a pretense, or there's some truth in it?
So it's tragically funny what they're trying to do. I can't help going back, because everything that's happening in Iraq, the turmoil, the killing, the sectarianism, the chaos, this dark scenario that's all over Iraq goes back to 2003. If we're not even going to go further back to after the Gulf War and 10 years of economic sanction against Iraq. We just go back 11 years. After the attack, after all that bombardment and destroying half of the country and killing and invading Iraq, what happened is this invasion intensified the sectarianism in Iraq. So the so-called Sunnis, the so-called Shias, the so-called Arabs, the so-called Kurds. Well, in Iraqi Kurdistan there has always been some divisions with the other parts of Iraq, and they had under Saddam a sort of autonomy. For example, they could learn their own language, Kurdish, in schools. They had more rights, autonomous rights, as opposed to Turkey, for example, or even Kurdistan in Iran. But this, the Kurdish nationalist parties and organizations use the opportunity of attack to actually take power, become the dominant power there. And now when you go to the other side of Iraq, they have killed and bombarded, and terrorism started flourishing in Iraq. They said that they're going to Iraq to get rid of the weapons of mass destruction and also something about terrorist groups. First of all, we found out very quickly that there was no weapon of mass destruction there. What they actually did was a mass destruction in Iraq. Before that, with economic sanction, and then with actual bombs. And then they intensified the terrorist war inside Iraq. Ever since this invasion, every single day you hear of some kind of bombs going off here or there in Baghdad or different cities, and people just getting killed. Before that, like, there were people who were so-called Sunnis or so-called Shia. They had intermarriages very easily between them. But you saw so many times that the terrorists of one group would come and kill the husband who was Shia and the wife Sunni, or vice versa. And they have used depleted uranium in Iraq, and many kids are born now in Iraq with deficiencies, and many people have got killed or become disabled because of it. So this situation was already chaotic. This situation was already terrorist-ridden. Maliki is one of their puppets. Who brought Maliki to power? Maliki came to power after the invasion, but they want to say we brought democracy to Iraq, and Maliki was voted, and then he disregarded the Sunnis. He disregarded any human being in Iraq. It's all about just putting money in their own pocket. They're really like cowboys getting one place and trying to just take everything from that country. and people's lives have been destroyed totally. So saying that this happened because Maliki did not take care of its the Sunni population is just rubbish.
You mentioned earlier on about the situation of the Kurdish population within Iraq, mainly in Kirkuk and northern Iraq. It's very important that we maybe talk a little bit more detail in this. Now that everybody has seen the Iraqi soldiers have really melted away, and as you said, there was no resistance to the attack by ISIS soldiers or militiamen. Do you think that the Kurdish population would use this opportunity to actually form a total autonomous country, not just within Iraq? And maybe in this same regard, maybe we can touch on the question of, do you think that Iraq will be partitioned in 3 sections?
Well, first of all, about why the army did not resist, there is a lot of talks about that the army, well, it's mainly the army that was formed under Saddam Hussein, and Ba'athist army.
But trained,
I mean, the generals.
But trained later by the US forces.
Yes, but you're talking about soldiers basically there, and but the main, that's what they say. I don't have the statistics here. That the Ba'athist main generals or the top commanders, they are supporting, that's what they say, they're supporting ISIS. Again, they say because Ba'athists were Sunni, but I don't know how much, I don't really believe it's all about being Sunni or Shia. It's other things behind it. If you remember, just 1 or 2 days after the attack, Saddam Hussein's daughter thanked Saudi Arabia for its help. So it was very clear that Ba'athists were for this invasion and this attack because, well, they want to get the power, and this is one way they can do it. With Kurdistan, it's a bit trickier. Now they say the Kurdistan Peshmergas or partisans or whatever, they have tried to build a resistance, armed resistance against ISIS. They haven't really fought so much yet. It's just talk about it. But they had tried to become independent. But I think in the agreements, written or unwritten agreements between the West and Turkey and probably Syria before, they did not want to have an independent Kurdistan, especially Turkish government does not want that right on its border, and it has a Kurdish problems itself. So and it's trying not to compromise. So whether that's Kurdish nationalists would not do it on their own. They would not take matters in their own hand and say we want to be independent. They have to get the green light from the West, from the US before they do anything. And so it's possible. It's possible. I mean, at this moment, anything is possible. But I think what is most possible is a very more chaotic situation, what we call a dark scenario. Like something like Afghanistan, even worse, or like Syria, now we see it in Iraq, than a partition. Like when you say partition, people think, okay, there is a partition, but we have 3 parts that people are living. They have a structure, they have infrastructure, they have a life. It's some kind of civility, whether it's good or the government is good or bad, I don't talk about that, but you have some kind of civility. I doubt it that you can bring any kind of civility back to Iraq as long as these forces are there.
Yeah, a lot of people are actually saying in the West, at least in mass media, that it's going to happen, and it's actually happened. It's too late. Iraq is not the same as we knew it. I mean, when you think about it, Iraq and a part of Syria, where the map of Middle East, especially in Iraq and Syria, as we see it now, wasn't like this after the First World War. It was the British. It was part of the colony of Britain that actually divided the country, and it is what it is. And when you look at it now, the British government and the American government are still interfering in the region. As you said earlier, it makes everything so confusing. But in the midst of all this is the people who are actually suffering. There are forces, as you said, militarily fighting against each other, but we've witnessed a wave of refugees leaving their homes and houses and towns, and goodness knows where they're going to go. We've got another dark scenario regarding millions of refugees. That was just a comment, not a question.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go to another question. Well, because of the importance of the region, and we've got Iran next door. Some people say that actually they say that this there's a solution to the so-called crisis, and that solution would require some understanding or cooperation between Iran and US. What do you say to that?
You know, we've seen so many different things in these past 20 years that it's really mind-blowing. Ever since Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc fell, the world became much more destabilized, because before you had two superpowers, they had each their own share of the world, and it was Cold War, but they would watch their own part. After the fall of Soviet Union, you so all of a sudden faced a one superpower world, which was not all that strong either. So we've seen all these wars happening. We had it in Yugoslavia, in Europe, right in the heart of Europe. Nobody believed you would see something in Europe, but you saw Yugoslavia. They was just the ethnic cleansing that you saw there. But since it was in Europe, they wrapped it up much more quickly. But Yugoslavia did not happen on its own. It was the manipulation and the work of US and Germany, especially in Croatia, against Serbia and all of that. And then Africa. Look at Africa. So many different countries in Africa have become just a land of war. You know, you have all these warlords taking over one section. Or you have over diamond, over all this mining, you have so many wars going on. That famous film Blood Diamond, that everyone was so touched by it, to only show a little bit of it. Sudan, Somalia, and now in Nigeria, you had this go to Nigeria of these terrorist actions. Then you have in Central Republic of Africa and Congo and Liberia and all of that, all these fights and wars going on. People are devastated. Like in Somalia, people had to turn into pirates. But just pirating could get some food in their mouth and their families. And again, there is Islamist terrorism against state terrorism led by the US. And then the Middle East, you had always Hezbollah and Israel and Hamas, and the Palestinian question was always very heated, very sensitive, very important issue, that you always had some kind of war going on, some kind of terrorist actions, mainly by Israel, and then Hamas added. And the funny thing is, things keep coming. You know, Hamas, one of the main, now they talk as one of the main enemies of Israel and the West. You know who created Hamas? Israel.
Okay.
At the time of Intifada in Palestine, which was very actually left and progressive and secular, in order to stop that Intifada, Israel created Hamas, an Islamic group. Now it's become its main foe and enemy. So you look at it, they're always doing something to keep that place, if they can't have it their own way, to have it in a chaotic situation. After the uprising of the countries in the North Africa and Middle East, started by Tunisia, then moved to Egypt, and then Libya, Syria, you had also Yemen, South Yemen, a little bit in Algeria, a little bit in Morocco, but mainly these 4 countries that I mentioned. What did they do? The West, any place they could manipulate politically, they pushed the Islamic forward, and any place that they couldn't, they created a war there. And like, for example, in Libya, they couldn't politically manipulate it. NATO actually intervened, and what did it do? Brought an Islamic government into power. The first thing they said is legalizing polygamy for men. The first thing after all that war, as though people had an uprising against Gaddafi, just because they really were waiting to get polygamy legalized. So, Libya. And then Syria, they couldn't manipulate. They started arming these terrorist Islamic groups, and the fight, supported by Turkey, supported by Saudi Arabia, by Qatar, and of course the United States and the West. And the atrocities committed by these Islamist groups became so vicious that the West had to watch itself. So it had to sort of separate itself a little bit from these Islamic groups who people saw on YouTube. They're taking the liver out of a Syrian soldier and eating it. Like this kind of stuff that was happening. In Tunisia, maybe was the least violent case, and then you had Egypt. It was the plan of the West, and with the whole support of the West, that Muslim Brotherhood came to power, and they were saying that they want to have a moderate Islamic state like Turkey. People rose against it. Now you see what happened. Another Mubarak has come to power. So I believe that actually, despite what's looking that US is upset and Britain is upset, and they want to try to get some kind of forces to push ISIS out of Iraq, I think US and Britain and the West were behind this attack. Just anybody with a little bit of common sense, everybody knows how Saudi Arabia is in the pocket of the US. Saudi Arabia would not do anything without the green light of the US, would it? Qatar, the same thing. They wouldn't do anything without the green light of the US. And they attacked. Now we're looking at, oh, it's so terrible. US is so upset. And then the journalists are talking about it happened because US withdrew its army.
Yeah, but what interest do they have, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and America, in provoking or even encouraging groups like ISIS to commit such atrocities as they have done in Iraq? What is the big picture? What is the aim of them? What will they achieve by doing so?
I'll go back to before you said that after the World War, but before that, Palestine, and they tried to create something as Israel, and then I don't know, it was in the 60s that Israel was, I don't remember when State of Israel called its independence. But ever since that, the Middle East has never really been a peaceful place. Because of the Palestinian question, there has always been war, there has always been some sort of terrorist actions, and no hope for a real peaceful, secular or region in the Middle East. You've always had that. There was always a war, and then Hezbollah started in Lebanon. Do you remember in the 70s they did the same thing with Lebanon? Israel actually came in. Lebanon became something like Afghanistan. Then people were talking about Lebanese, as though any place that was becoming chaotic would be like Lebanon. Now Lebanon has become a bit better. They talk about Afghanistan, or they talk about Syria. For some time they were talking about Yugoslavia. But we look at the Middle East. At least as far back as 60s ago, there has always been war. There's been war over this between Israel and the so-called Arab countries, its neighbors. war with Palestine, some terrorist actions either by PLO or more than that by Israel. In the 70s, Israel created that war in Lebanon. In the 80s, Israel attacked Lebanon and that the two big refugee centers. I forgot the name. Shatila. How many people were killed?
But the question always remains in political economy. You always hear this theory or argument that stability is always better than instability for profit making, for the economy to rule. But as you say, now from the 60s, that region has never been stable.
Even before that, I'm just going back as far as 60s.
Yeah, I know.
Before that, you had the Second World War. There was.
So, are you saying that the whole state of mayhem and chaos in Middle East, and now specifically in Iraq, it's something that it's like a strategy? It's something that the West holds on to in order to have the political upper hand in the region. Is that the aim?
You see, before that, when there was the Cold War, right, Soviet Union was supporting some of the states, like Iraq, like Syria, and Palestinians, and the US was behind Israel, behind Egyptian government, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, and that. So you had some kind of stability, instability, like what it was. There was war, all the time war, but it was clear, this is Soviet Union, this is US. After the fall of Soviet Union, everybody thought, now the Palestinian question is going to be solved, now peace is going to come, now democracy is going to come. See what happened? US wants, with the new world order that Bush Sr. started it with Thatcher, if you remember. And that was the Gulf War in the 90s, and attack against Iraq. Do you know, even then, everybody said that Iraq had the green light by the US to attack Kuwait. The American ambassador had given Saddam the green light. But then they decided to change the situation. They killed so many people and then the sanction. Why? Why? What was it so important that they had to take Saddam away? It wasn't Saddam, and it wasn't Iraqi oil. Many people say it's because of oil. You see, Saddam was selling the oil. He was not keeping it for himself, was he? He was selling it, and the market always determined the prices. So it wasn't like the 19th century or before that colonialization because of oil. Now it's different. Oil is being sold by anybody who has it with the market price that is determined. So it wasn't oil. It was what was the New World Order? That US is the boss of the world. Okay? And Britain has always been very close to US. Thatcher actually, more than Bush, had a role in defining this strategy of attacking Saddam Hussein or Iraq at that time. And this is just continued. And as soon as people in the Middle East rose for their rights, rose for a better society, wanted freedom, and said, enough is enough, we want freedom, we want equality, we're tired of corruption. What happened? They either brought war on them, like Libya and Syria, or they brought Islamists and then again another Mubarak. So what it is, not always is stability is good for profit. This is old-fashioned looking at like factories are working. No, that's not the case. US wants to be the boss of the world and is trying to be that, and Britain is helping it. And when you can't have it the way you want it, chaotic situation is the best thing you have. US withdrew its troops from Iraq because it was forced to internally to do that. When Obama came to power, he was going to do it much earlier. He just postponed it. But it wasn't like Guantanamo Bay that he said he would free all the prisoners and he never did. There he had to do it. But now, as soon as, it's another thing. See, when US is not there, when Britain is not there, situation becomes more chaotic, because those people are all terrorists and they just tear each other apart. This is another way. So they actually take a lot out of that. And as far as the oil or anything is concerned, everybody's doing it and taking the oil out, and the business is going as usual. Or in Africa, when we're talking about this destabilization of Africa, has the profit fallen? Not at all. The diamond, the mines and everything is business as usual.
Yeah, thanks for all that, because it's very enlightening. But the original question was the consequences of this crisis or these events in Iran. What do you think? Do you think it will spread to Iran? Do you think the Iranian army will intervene? As we know that some Pasdaran have actually stationed themselves in Iraq. What is going on there?
Actually, after the attack by US and Britain, Iran, Islamic regime, got more power in Iraq. It became more powerful in Iraq than at the time of Saddam Hussein. In Iraqi Kurdistan, there are Pasdarans staying there, actually, going and coming very freely. And Maliki is supported by Islamic regime. So what happened, this attack actually fostered the situation of Islamic regime in that country and thereby in the region. But now they've sent more troops to fight against ISIS. And even they're talking about that maybe there would be some kind of compromise between the US and Britain with Iran. We'll have to see that. There's so much going on and there's so much manipulation that it's difficult to say. But whether that's going to have overflowed into Iran or something, it's possible. This is really scary, but it's possible that this situation, because when you're talking about usually the chaotic situations or dark scenarios are happening, are created by some kind of terrorist groups. Islamic regime itself totally is a whole terrorist organization in a big picture. And it has so many different pasdarans, the different military militias who are into opium, drug smuggling and human trafficking into the Navy. So they have their own business going. So all of those could become different groupings to try to get something for themselves. And also, one more thing that it really tells me that the US is behind this whole thing. There is this Mujahideen organization. What are they called in English? I don't remember. Mujahideen, I think many people know. Maryam Rajavi and Masoud Rajavi, they're leaders. No, not the resistance, not the national resistance. Mujahideen itself. If you remember, Mujahideen was listed as a terrorist group for a long time by the US. Finally, they got their name off the list. And they did it by spying for the US in Iran, like all the nuclear facilities the information was given, by being trained in parts of the US. These are all the information have come out of. So actually they've become something like Contra in Nicaragua, really sort of dark, black kind of gangs for the US.
Pro-US.
It's more than pro-US. It's actually their puppet.
Yeah.
And after their name was written off, they opened an office right in Washington, D.C., right close to the
White House,
Obama. And when Syria was in war, they wrote in their own website and everything that they are ready to go and fight Assad in that sort of opposition groups that was supported by Saudi Arabia and the West. Now they are saying ISIS is a revolutionary group. They're very happy and they're supporting it. You know, I mean, all these really puppets of US are supporting this ISIS. So all of a sudden, US has lost so much influence over all these puppets. It's not, it doesn't ring right. But another thing is Mujahideen are also an armed organization, and they're written off as a terrorist organization, but they're capable of doing, like at the time of Iran and Iraq war, they fought in the army of Saddam against Islamic Republic. So they are one of those groups that can actually create a chaotic situation, a dark scenario. So you have all these ingredients that could create a chaotic situation in Iran. Iran is a larger country, Iraq is much smaller, but you can think of the borders. For example, you have the Iranian Kurdistan, which is the most closest. Then you have, in the map I have to think, some other parts of Iran that are at the borders. And once you start in the borders, we have now many nationalist groupings in Iran, which are very, very reactionary groups. They call themselves Baluch nationalist group and Arab nationalist group, Azeri nationalist groups. All these kind of groups become active to get piece of something. As what happened in Yugoslavia, all of a sudden Croatian nationalism, Serbian nationalism, Bosnian nationalism, they all started that tragic ethnic cleansing. So all of that could happen. If you remember, about 20-something years ago, Mansour Hekmat had a sort of a political debate that then, because of the terrorist actions of the Islamic regime, and we were thinking that there is a possibility of toppling that regime, a dark scenario is possible in Iran. Then, just imagine now, with all these viruses going around, it is possible, and we really have to do all we can to prevent it.
Yeah, the danger is that, as you said, a lot of people look at the situation and they think that is bad, and the unfortunate thing is that people start thinking, oh, okay, let any army go there and get rid of the ISIS because they're the culprits. And some say if, for example, US doesn't intervene now militarily, it will be accused of weakness in the face of terrorism or giving up on the Middle East. So do you think that the whole thing is just a ploy to actually give opportunity to the US to show its dominance and
I think that has a lot to do with it. I think it's still the new world order of US has a lot to do with it. I think we're still living in that context of the war of terrorists, state terrorists and Islamic terrorists. What we've seen in the past 10-12 years, that some of the Islamic groups have changed place, going to, because yes, and also because the US creates some of these and uses that. Like, as I said, Hamas before that was created by Israel. Al-Qaeda was created by the US. Bin Laden was on their payroll, and then it turned against it. Now ISIS, they were supporting it in the war against Assad. That's the thing. So they keep changing place. But the end result is that you have these terrorists fighting each other, and people are just falling to their knees, falling to their death. Cities are destroyed, civility is destroyed, a big chaos is all over the place. Sectarianism has grown so much, either on the on the basis of religion or ethnicity or race, and it's getting worse. So yeah, I mean,
so what do you think? Which force do you think holds the key to peace and actual true prosperity in the region?
We have mentioned that now since September 11th, and I still believe deeply that that's the only answer. But how to do it is the difficult question. You see, we've talked about two poles of terrorism: state terrorism against Islamic terrorism. And we said, but the world is not only two poles, there are three poles. And the third pole is the civilized humanity, freedom-loving humanity, egalitarian humanity. And the only way you can get rid of these terrorists is if that third pole is organized and mobilized to stand against both. Because what happens many times, because of this enemy, they go by this very this saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But that's logic. People start defending one of these terrorist groups against the other, thinking that's the answer. But that's not the answer. The enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend. And the third pole has to be organized and mobilized. But that's been what we were trying to get our tooth in it for the past 12, 13 years to do that. Because, and the situation has become worse and worse. It was Afghanistan, now it's Iraq, now it's Syria, now it's Libya. The whole region, and Africa was Somalia, then Sudan came in, and now Nigeria is entering into that situation. It's just spreading. So that's the only way we can actually get rid of both of them.
A powerful socialist force.
Exactly, exactly. But to be honest with you, for all the organizer, the leadership has to have this socialist, communist, worker communist worldview. But not everybody needs to be thinking themselves to be socialist or communist. It's a question of to look at the world. Do we want to live in this world? Do we want to live in this world of chaos, killing, murdering, atrocities, just carried out by two poles of terrorists, and keep telling ourselves, okay, if we defend US, maybe things would get better. Things get only worse. On top of that, we have the economic crisis, that poverty and all of that. So everyone with a little bit of common sense, I don't want that. I don't want it. And what I should do, I should organize myself with everybody who says, I'm against both of that, and I want a civilized world. I want a world with more freedom, more equality, and prosperity for everybody. Then that's the only solution.
Thanks very much, Azad.
Thank you.
Thank you.